were Southern sympathizers, and they surrounded them and blockaded them so they couldn't get supplies. The cannons going on. So as soon as Lincoln takes over, one of his first orders is get those guys some food. Now the guys surrounding Fort Sumter know that they're getting ready to run the blockade. And so they fire on the blockade, or they fire on Fort Sumter, and the war's on. You know, to give you, I think one of the good examples of this, of what the Civil War was like, the fellow inside the fort was a guy by the name of Anderson, Robert Anderson. And he had asked the guy that surrounded him, you know, look, if you just give me a couple more days, I'll be out of food. And then I can surrender like a gentleman. And the guy surrounding him said no. And the commander of that was a guy by the name of PTG Beauregard. Anderson was Beauregard's mentor at West Point, and they were very, very close friends. But by that time, that's where the emotions were. Robert E. Lee, who in my opinion was the greatest general and the most honorable man on either side, was asked by Lincoln to take over the forces. I can imagine the agony the guy went through. And he went back a day later and he said, I cannot raise my sword against my fellow Virginians. A couple of years before that, there was a real fanatic, a nutcase, by the name of John Brown, who had gone to Harper's Ferry. What he was going to do was he was going to capture all of the arms at Harper's Ferry, distribute them to the slaves, and have an uprising. He got in, he got surrounded. The slaves weren't interested, and the army was set to put down the insurgency. Guess who was at the head of that army? Robert E. Lee. So that gives you an idea of the emotional, everything that went on. I mean, you know, this thing had been building for 100 years. And everything was wrong. It was, when I teach American history and I teach the Civil War, I really have trouble doing it because I get very emotional. You know, we have, in our Civil War, to this day, we lost more people in our Civil War than we have in all the rest of our wars put together. Because everyone who died in the Civil War was an American. And Lincoln never recognized the South because he was trying to pull the Union together. He said they were in rebellion.
Did they recognize him in the newspapers?
He calls us the house divided. But no, he never did. And that was a big pushing point. Actually, one of the little incidents of this, yeah, we're not going to get back to that. One of the incidents of the Civil War was a thing called the Trent Affair.
So what was the war that many soldiers lost their lives within like 2 hours? What was that one?
That was it. You're probably thinking of Gettysburg, not Shiloh. The cornfield. The cornfield is where it happened. And I can't even
There's two.
I can almost see it. I can almost see it. I had a tape of it, a really good tape of it. And Kevin made me a DVD, and I'm trying to picture. And Tatum, thank you. But that wasn't unusual. You know, right, shift gears again. The thing is that the Civil War was really the first war where we started fighting with relatively modern weapons. We started rifling barrels and things like that. Started adding huge rate. Monitor the Merrimack. One day, Hampton Roads, the world's navies became obsolete because of the ironclad. They sat there and they shot at each other all day, and neither one of them sunk. And the world's navies were all wooden ships. One day, you know, and this is going to, this is, well, this guy just joined us. This is going to be part of the Industrial Revolution, because we're not just building textile plants and things like that. A lot of this technology is going into war. And of course, when we finally figured it out, it was in World War I. Where, you know, you were saying, geez, 7,000 hours. There was one battle, the Battle of the Marne, before the United States entered the war. In one day, the casualties of the Battle of the Marne were 500,000 on each side. That's 1 million casualties in one day. Well, think about it. You got these guys over here, and they're all wearing green, and these guys over here, and they're all wearing red, and they get out their rifles and they march towards each other, and you know that worked really, really well. But what happened at the beginning of World War I is they got close enough, and these guys pulled out their muskets, and somebody here pulled out a machine gun, and a tank, and an airplane, and they had poison gas, and they had telegraphs so they could coordinate their armies better. And those techniques didn't work anymore. That was starting to happen in the Civil War.
Pigeons in World War I. At one point.
Oh yeah, they
Still use pigeons.
but I mean, when we look at the incredible technology in World War I, and they were still fighting like they used to fight in the 17th century for about 2 days until they realized it wasn't going to work anymore. You know, then we got to the 20th century. Joe Stalin, everyone knows Joe Stalin, right? Probably killed at least 20 million of his own people. But I still have a favorite quote from Joe Stalin. He said, you know, if one person dies, it's a tragedy. And if 1,000 people die, it's a statistic. Don't we have a tendency to think that way? You know that. Or one person who died in Keokuk, Iowa, and into the news, and terribly sad story, and I think the numbers get bigger, the tragedy gets smaller and smaller. And I wonder if that's not because we can't comprehend it. You know, I'm still thinking about that massacre they had in Syria the other day. It was 130. I can't imagine 130 dead people. That's a lot of people. And guys, I've been to war. And then they start talking about thousands. And then we start talking about, you know, I'll give you a statistic I bet you didn't know. Today, in the next 24 hours, 1,000 children will starve to death.
Actually, I did know that.
How many will be born?
I don't think the two are relevant.
They're not.
You know, in my book, that sucks.
That's the rest of the world, or?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I thought you meant just.
No.
It's still bad.
In the world, we got a little, what, we're pushing 7 billion now?
Yeah.
Somewhere a little over 1 billion of those people do not have access to clean drinking water.
But it's not a surprise because the world is, most of the people in the world are concerned about others. You know, they're concerned about their life. Oh, how's my family gonna get this? Or, you know, I gotta go buy this for my family. They don't give that second thought about, yeah, there's a starving kid just down the street from me.
I agree. And another sad thing about it is a lot of people get on the bandwagon, save the children and all that. So many of those are money making outfits.
That money goes to children.
Yeah. So, I mean, we throw these numbers around all the time. And we don't stop to think about it. If you live in America, you get some bad breaks, I'll sympathize with you. But not a whole lot. And I will tell you, there are a lot of people starving in America too.
But isn't it true that you go to Rosebud, North Dakota, that's a third world country, that reservation.
I'll tell you something else. And I had to see this actually I saw it on Al Jazeera. They did a docu on Hungry America. And they discovered a huge number of people living in sewers in Las Vegas.
Really?
And I lost it when the reporter was talking to him, and there was a little girl, and she said something, and the reporter said, "What?" And she said it again, and finally the reporter walked right up to her and said, "No, what did you say?" And she said, "My mother be trapped so we can get better food." In Las Vegas, Nevada, guys. Yeah.
I don't know if this is more pertains to here or would be an economics class, but do you think the reason why there's so much hunger here, and don't get me wrong, like I'm definitely compassionate towards it, is because so many people have become dependent on
It's always good, but I don't believe it.
well, no, I just was listening to something about it the other day. Actually, it was on about an Indian reservation. How this certain group of Indians that are getting the most government aid are actually um, less like economically.
Yeah, I can't speak for Rosebud and some of those other places, but I actually lived on the Navajo reservation. And at face value, you go, man, look at the subsidies these guys get and everything. But I think the most corrupt organizations that I've run across are the tribes in most cases. And you get down there to the Navajo reservation, and they get a lot of money from the government. And it stops at the first and second tier.
Yeah.
The president and people like that.
But you gotta take into consideration too, that most of the people that are in control of the councils, tribal councils and stuff like that, they are not native. They are mostly
Boy,
Caucasian.
they are in the Navajo res. I mean, and I think in most tribes, you gotta be.
Yeah.
But when I was down there, it's all a matter of power. When I got down there, the president of the Navajo reservation, or the Navajo Nation, the guy by the name of Peter McCollum, and they threw him out because they caught him, bribery and everything else. It was great. They had all these, alleged secret conversations. They didn't call them dollars; they called them golf balls. And Peter would say, "Well, I can take care of that if you send me like 40,000 golf balls." Oh boy, I don't know what he's talking about. So they threw him out, put in a guy by the name of Peterson's off. He lasted a couple of years, turned out to be just as crooked. So they threw him out, and guess who they put back in? I don't know. Here's the way I see it. I look at history, and I look at history from the long view. And here's what happens every time. Every time. The economic status gets to the point where the few elite have the most power. They manage to acquire the most wealth. First of all, it comes from the lower classes, and then it starts during the middle classes. And when enough of it happens, the pitchforks come out. Then you start all over again. But you know, I guess I don't mean to be on a soapbox, guys. I'm also a big fan of social justice, and I was looking real hard to see something like that. It's gonna be cool. You know, one of these days, youth is gonna be a utopia, or it's gonna be gone. One of the two. But I believe in the basic goodness of almost every human being. And I think that sooner or later that basic goodness will overcome.
Yeah. Goodness as a whole.
Don't worry about the world changing in the next 3 or 4 days. Years.
Or December
Decades.
21st. Yeah.
Millennia. Maybe millennia. I don't know, maybe centuries. You know, think about what the world was like in 1900. I think about what it is today.
Nothing is as good as it seems.
Maybe that's as bad as it seems.
There it is.
Well, no, I mean, nothing is as good as it seems. Like you said, the 1900s, you know.
Oh, you mean
might have
look
been
at
a
that?
better time, but nobody like realizes what the dangers were back then.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
So,
I
and it's
agree.
even with people, nothing is as good as it seems.
And you guys ever
How
been
you
to
see it.
a BMW? I love it, you know?
You know what?
You walk in and they sit around, these old guys, they sit around and they talk about how great the war was.
How great it was.
Okay. Oh yeah, that was great. Then you got out after 2 years. No, when we look back, we always remember the good, and we forget the bad. You know, and but surely we're better off today than we were. Think about this. The average person today in the United States, in Europe, in the Western world, and in a good portion of the Eastern world, the Middle East, and all of that, every one of them is living better than the kings and queens were living 150 years ago.
Except for the sewer Vegas people.
Except for the sewer people, yeah.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, my gosh, even Donald Rumsfeld said that he liked Al Jazeera now. I get a lot of money from Al Jazeera. I like it. It's the name. It sounds so bizarre. Anyway, some consideration. Okay, so we didn't get as far as I thought we were going to today, but that's all right.
I thought we were doing good, you said.
I was like, we're already here.
Going crazy with it.
Well, we were knocking them dead till you guys started asking about the Civil War, which isn't going to happen for another 250 years.
Yeah.
Hey, so now
Does anybody have anything else? Thank you for being here. Have a good weekend. I will see you on Tuesday.
Take it easy, man.
We got that strong.